Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here this evening. My name is Rabbi Jen Queen. I take she, her pronouns. I am proud to serve as the Director of Engagement and Reform Rabbi at Harvard Hillel, and am one of the Jewish chaplains on campus. And we're really thrilled to be kicking off this series, Sustaining Practices for Perilous Times. This is such an incredible opportunity to demonstrate not only the spiritual diversity of our Harvard community, but also the diversity of spiritual practice itself, but what it means to be a spiritual person and have spiritual practices. And I am really honored to be co-hosting this space with Rachel Lakin.
Amazing. Hi, all. I'm Rachel. I am working as a multi-faith engagement fellow this year at Harvard and based in the Memorial Church. And I'm just really excited to be working on this project. It's been great to work with Rabbi Jen and great to get to connect with so many of Harvard's awesome chaplains. And I'm just excited to be able to learn from you all and kind of facilitate conversation between chaplains and students. So without too much more introduction, I'll pass it over to our presenters. So tonight we're going to hear from Greg Epstein, who is the humanist chaplain who serves humanist, agnostic, and atheist students at Harvard and MIT. And we're also going to hear from John Thompson, who is the chaplain with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We're so grateful to the two of you. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll pass it over to Greg to start us off.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you so much, Rachel and Rabbi Jen, for having me, and great to be with you, John, and to all attending live or via video afterwards. Great to see you, and thanks for being part of my community as I try to figure out day by day by day how to live in these weird times. And it really is hard to do that. And the first thing that I started thinking about way back in March when everything started shutting down was I pulled out a favorite book of mine, something that I had written about and researched already way back over a decade ago as a Harvard Divinity School student, and then later on as an author. I included this book in my book in a prominent way, and it's a book that uplifts me and inspires me when times are really hard, perhaps precisely because it's, in many ways, it's not an uplifting book. It's a book that really grapples with very, very difficult times and refuses to be naive about them. But it also refuses to go numb, and it also refuses to do nothing. It's a book that acknowledges our experience of sort of getting knocked flat on the ground emotionally and or physically by circumstances, and yet that coaches us through, that talks us through the process of figuring out how to go forward and live a meaningful life, and live a meaningful life for ourselves and for each other. And this book, which is called The Plague by Albert Camus, the Nobel laureate French-Algerian philosopher who died young in the middle of the 20th century after being awarded the Nobel Prize, and who wrote this book really about coronavirus. Well, not exactly, but this is a novel. It's perhaps the central work of his lifetime, although it's part of a series of other works that are also worthy of that distinction, among which is the myth of Sisyphus, a short essay that's very important to me as well. But it's a novel that's set in a small city, Oran, North Algeria, North Africa, French Algeria. It's set during a kind of nether time, early modern times, or early in our time, for lack of a better description right now. At a time when the bubonic plague makes a mysterious and deadly reappearance, and where everyone is trapped in a situation where there is an unseen pestilence. It can strike at any time. Human contact and breath passes it along. It can and perhaps will kill everyone in which it comes into contact, with which it comes into contact. And the people of the city are trapped. They can't get out, and no one else can get in, and nobody knows what's going to happen. So that's the cheerful situation. And what I want to do is read a few really short passages, and we can talk about them a little bit. This is from part 2 of the book, and I'll just read it, and we can maybe discuss a little tiny bit of it. And by the way, so that Jen and Rachel, could people have this document shared with them that I wrote? Yeah. So basically, I'm going to read from a few short passages. If you want to click on them and check it out, great. You don't need to. All right. Your victories will never be lasting. That's all. Ryu's face darkened. Ryu is the sort of Camus character, the doctor who's trying to cure everyone of the plague. And he knows that he can't really do it. But he's going to try everything he can. Yes, I know that, but it's no reason for giving up the struggle. No reason, I agree. Only I now can picture what this plague must mean for you. Yes, a never-ending defeat. Teru stared at the doctor for a moment, and then he turned and tramped heavily toward the door. Ryu followed him and was almost at his side when Teru, who was staring at the floor, suddenly said, "Who taught you all this, doctor?" And the reply came suddenly and promptly, "Suffering." So the first piece of what for me became trying to figure out what is my pandemic philosophy, as I began to realize that I was going to be living in the midst of a pandemic for the next 6 months, year, 2 years, maybe more, is to accept reality. We are all part of a never-ending struggle, a never-ending defeat. We don't win all the time. And there's no battle that we can fight that we're going to win in every way at the end. We are part of the human race, the human species, being in some ways ever defeated. There is much suffering. There are no guarantees. This is real. And yet, as Camus says, there's no reason in anything that I've just said for giving up the struggle. Why not? Let me take you through the next piece that I put down here. There's one thing I must tell you. There's no question of heroism in all of this. It's a matter of common decency. That's an idea which may make some people smile, but the only means of fighting a plague is common decency. Now, you may have heard that theme of common decency sometime in the last few days, as we were having a social conversation about what it means to lead a complex society. And it strikes me that I think some themes from this political campaign and what Camus was arguing in this short passage are right there on the same level. But what I wanted to say to you as Harvard students or Harvard affiliates in this moment with this little piece is, don't be a hero. And don't even necessarily be a leader. Be decent. That's something that I think we don't talk about enough at Harvard, and where in some ways I wonder if Harvard as an institution which puts us ahead of the game in so many of the games that we play in life puts us actually behind. Where we're taught so often, be a leader, leadership is what matters, and even leadership in moral character. But does pursuing leadership and moral character sometimes actually have the opposite effect? Like, what if our goal was simply to do the most decent thing that we could do, and to teach one another and teach ourselves to be willing to assert ourselves in the name of that decency? To be willing to assert ourselves in the name of the fact that I deserve a decent life and I'm going to get it for myself, and so do you, and so should you, and we'll both have better and more decent lives if we help one another. So don't be a leader is something that this crisis impresses upon me, because really, like, who are the leaders in the world of coronavirus? I mean, sure, doctors have gotten more famous in certain ways, and epidemiologists, right? Certain politicians, I suppose, but the idea of leadership is very strange in this time, and the idea of decency to me is much more relevant. Number 3 rather, and this is from part 4 of the book, and I'll try to be brief here. This epidemic has taught me nothing new, except that I must fight it at your side. I know positively, yes, Ryu, I can say I know the world inside out, as you may see, that each of us has the plague within him. No one on earth is free from it. Sorry about the gendered language, by the way. Anyway, and I know too that we must keep endless watch on ourselves, lest a careless moment we breathe in somebody's face and fasten the infection on him or her. What's natural is the microbe. All the rest, health, integrity, purity, if you like, is a product of the human will, of a vigilance that must never falter. So what I'm getting at here, what Camus is getting at for me, is the idea that we all have the plague. Not only are we living in the midst of a never-ending defeat, but we all have this plague which is catching for human beings as soon as they're born, which is that we're mortal. We at some point will die. And we can't get out of that. There's no cure we can find for that. And so what do we want to do in the midst of that? How do we want to live in the midst of that? Camus continues, it needs tremendous willpower to live in the midst of that truth, a never-ending tension of the mind to avoid such lapses. Yes, Ryu, it's a wearying business being plague-stricken. It's a wearying business, but it's still more wearying or wearing to refuse to be it. So anybody else felt a little tired at times during this whole pandemic world, like Disney World, but pandemic world, right? Have you had any days where you just feel like, I don't want to get up today. I really don't. Please don't make me. Because I've had a lot of those days. Because the mental strain that is required of us to live each day thinking, how can I not get myself infected? How can I not get others infected? How can I find a way to live decently? How can I find connection? How can I find community? How can I find love? How can I do well in my classes? How can I, how can I get ahead? Get ahead of what? It's tiring. And again, it never ends. So then what? Well, look, I promise you that I at least bring this book to you as something that will make you happier than maybe the sort of most pessimistic interpretation of all that I'm saying. And I'm sure that John, who will follow me, will have a more pleasant in some ways, story to tell. But to me, this book is inspiring because it talks to me about how in my darkest days, in my darkest moments, there's hope, there's light, there's strength between me and you. And I won't read the last passage, and I won't get into why I picked it, other than to say, in certain ways, we're going to start to feel normal again. But let's not ever hold ourselves to the standard of feeling totally normal. Not now and not then. Let's learn this from this, that in a pandemic, in the plague, just feeling human and connecting with other humans is more than enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. That was awesome. Really, really timely message for all of us. So I'm John Thompson, and I'm the chaplain for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints here at Harvard. When this particular series was being suggested, I thought, well, what could I say? And it's kind of an odd little thing that I'm kind of presenting today, of a sustaining practice, right? When you think of sustaining practices, particularly in faith communities or ethical communities, right, you want to look towards things that inspire, that give solace to the soul in some way, and whether it be from great literature, as Greg shared with us, music, or different modes of worship, right, and looking to heaven. That all of these ideas that we have are beautiful and needed. And then here I come along and I say, well, how about I talk a little bit about family history? So it kind of is a little outlier, I think, in some ways about this. But the more I thought about it, I thought, you know what? It is something for me personally that is very sustaining. And I think that my faith community looks to our family history as something that's very sustaining in all situations. And I'll kind of maybe explain a little bit about that. But one of the ideas I think that why this becomes very central to our faith community is the idea that we kind of believe that the greatest blessings of heaven are achieved through establishing a covenant relationship with God. But in that covenant relationship with God, we also believe that we also need to have covenant relationships with our families and ultimately communities. But it begins with the family. It's kind of what we feel is the very core of the community. And that family relationship and covenant relationship in families includes our ancestors. So to that end, we seek out to know our fathers and our mothers as far back as we can. And believing, I think, that maybe probably the one word that might answer why we look to our ancestors so much is the word inheritance. Believing that we inherit the blessings, that God has, and those blessings come down to us through our families, and so we have a very strong family culture in our church, and desiring, right, to do all we can to strengthen families and to maintain and to also make connections, right, and again making connections not with just our immediate families but our ancestors. And then it turns out that there are actually some actual real sustaining benefits from doing this, even if you're not religious. There's a great New York Times article that came out a couple of years ago that talks about the stories that bind us. And in this article, and I made a little flyer that has a portion of the article in there that says, and I think they'll put that into the chat box as well, you can connect to. It says, one part says, do you know where your grandparents grew up? Do you know where your mom and dad went to high school? Do you know where your parents meet, or where your parents met? Do you know an illness or something really terrible that happened in your family? Do you know the story of your birth? And then it mentions these couple of doctors who researched the idea of when kids know the story of their families, right? What effect did it have on them? So there's these two doctors, Dr. Duke and Dr. Fivish, I think it's Fivish, asked those questions of 4 dozen families in the summer of 2001. And then they taped several of their dinner table conversations. And they compared the children's results to a battery of psychological tests that children had taken. And they reached an overwhelming conclusion. The more that children knew about their family's history, the stronger their sense of control over their lives, the higher their self-esteem, and the more successfully they believed their families functioned. The do you know scale turned out to be the best single predictor of children's emotional health and happiness. And then Dr. Duke said, the ones who knew more about their families proved to be more resilient, meaning they could moderate the effects of stress. And then the question that the article author writes, why does knowing where your grandmother went to school help a child overcome something as minor as a skinned knee or as major as a terrorist attack? And then Dr. Duke responded and said, the answers have to do with a child's sense of being part of a larger family, right? And there's so much more in this article. It's really fascinating, but this idea that knowing your ancestors and knowing something about your family, your extended family, gave it gave these families that were looking at these children resiliency. And it just so happened they were doing this research when 9/11 occurred, and they were able to go back to these families and see how these kids reacted to this terrorist attack. And those kids, again, who had a high degree of knowing the family stories, were the ones who fared the best in that situation. And so I just wanted you to see that maybe even outside of my particular faith tradition, that there is something that can be really sustaining about connecting yourself to your family as far back as you can go with your ancestors. And so I just wanted to share with you something that you can do, and it's free and it's fun, I think, to kind of learn about these things. So I'm going to share a website with you because this is very much a part of our church culture and belief system, right? That our families and being connected to them and through covenants is very important, right? To receiving the fullest of God's blessings. So our church has put together one of the world's largest databases online of records. And they actually do have the world's largest online family tree, and that people are all sharing these resources to. And so this is free and open to the public. If you don't have to have any connection to my faith whatsoever, and you can sign up for free, and you can go in. Can you guys all see my screen right now? Okay. If you go in and you sign in, you'll see this main little top menu here at the top. And if you click on Family Tree, and if you go to Overview, this is what you'll see. It just kind of shares you with a little bit about creating the tree. But then you go to Tree, and it'll give you a little spot to kind of start your own name. And then you can put I'll move this over. So it puts a space where you can have your own name, and if you're married, a spouse, and then your parents, and you can go back to your grandparents. And then when you start getting to your grandparents and your great grandparents and anybody who's dead, right, who's passed away, they become kind of public domain, I guess, at that point, in the sense that the records, if they're over 100 years old, the records are free to be seen. And they'll connect your family to this world family tree that they've been created. And a lot of people have been doing this work. It's, one of the great works of the internet is family history. And so a lot of people have been creating this and putting this together, and you'll find your ancestors almost automatically sometimes. I mean, depends on your family and who's been doing the work, but a lot of people out there, this is a great hobby they have. And you'll find pictures, and you'll find documents. They connect all of the census records and everything else in there for you as well. And you actually will even get emails sent to you saying, hey, we found a record for your ancestor, and you can just click on it, and there you have an actual headstone. If someone took a picture of their headstone, or again, a marriage record or a birth record, and they'll just feed you information about your family. It's so awesome. And so I'll go back here to my great grandfather. Came across a journal that he had written. This is the mid 1800s. He self-published a journal, and Thomas Kinzer was his name. And there was a really, I think, a poignant moment here in light of our current condition that I just wanted to highlight, where he says, let's see, he said, afflictions bring good, gain, and glory to us here if we accept them in the right way. The pills may be bitter, but they perform wonderful operations. If we take them by direction of the great physician, the moral system is purged of much that is vile and vile and left healthful to become a successful co-worker with God. So I thank him for affliction. Chastisement causes us to feel our need of God. Many flee to him in time of storm, and then when the storm cloud passes and the rainbow spans its pathway, they forget their promises and forsake God. This is exceedingly dangerous. It is wrong. Don't do it, my dear reader, but stay with him forever, in sunshine and in shadow, every day and every night. For this is the only sure and safe refuge from all the ills of this life and from all calamities that sweep the earth. Anyway, just a sweet little thought of my great-great-grandfather, and those kinds of things are sustaining for me, and just a really powerful idea that that he preserved for his posterity, his dear readers. So anyway, one other thing I'll just kind of share about this. Let me exit out of here. So not only can you will again start kind of populating the tree for you once you get back a few generations. It'll allow you to upload any memories that you have. If you want to do audio recordings or pictures or any documents, journals, whatever that you have, you can upload. And our church has one of the highest rated forms of preserving documents and those kinds of things. Again, because we feel so strongly about preserving family history and those kinds of things. And then some of the fun things you can do is you can click on where am I from, and once you have a good database, you'll get a map and it'll show you where your ancestors come from, and you can just kind of check that out. It's kind of like the DNA stuff you've probably seen floating around, but this actually gives you your actual ancestors and what cities they're in, and you can zoom in, right, and see which areas of Europe they may have come from, and you can click in and you can actually go see that individual, their record, right? And then one last one, which is kind of even more fun. If you get there's an an app version you can download for free. It's called Family Tree, and in that app it'll let you connect with people in the room around you. Like if you're in a just a gathering of your family, or not just your family, I guess, but a gathering of friends. If your friends have done this, you can kind of just say, hey, how am I related to the people around me? And it'll actually show you how you're related to the people sitting next to you in the room. So little things like that are kind of neat. But I just want to, again, share this little thought, this idea that maybe connecting with your families a little more deeply can also be a very powerful, sustaining practice in a day like this. So thank you.
Thank you so much to both Greg and John for sharing these really profound resources. Something I forgot to mention at the very beginning. So each week, we've paired speakers based on emerging themes, as they came forward to describe their sustaining practices. And this week's theme was all about connection, and real connection to the past, and drawing upon the wisdom of those who came before us, whether they be, folks whose words and writing are particularly inspiring to us, or actually of those who are directly connected to us, whose experiences directly led us to the places and to becoming the people that we are today, whether by blood or by wisdom. We've inherited so much, and knowing these stories and learning from the wisdom of those who came before give us so much perspective for our own experiences, and really do help to sustain us. And may we draw strength and resilience from the stories that we've heard tonight, and from those that we are reading and collecting and hearing in our own lives as we move forward together. So again, thank you so much, Greg and John and Rachel, for all of your help in bringing this gathering together.